Three daughters disappeared from society in the summer of 1852. Their father, one of the wealthiest men in Georgia, told neighbors they'd fallen ill and needed complete isolation. For 11 months, no one saw them, when a new sheriff arrived in the county and started asking questions. He discovered something that made even hardened lawmen sick to their stomachs. What Edmund Rutledge had done to his own daughters in the name of preserving his legacy would become one of the most disturbing cases in Georgia history. A calculated experiment that involved false promises, systematic abuse, and a conspiracy reaching all the way to the state capitol. Before we continue with the story of Edmund Rutledge and what really happened behind the locked doors of Clearwater Plantation, I need you to do something. Hit that subscribe button right now, because stories like this, true stories that history tried to bury, don't get told often enough. And leave a comment telling me what state or city you're listening from. I want to know where my audience is, because every region has its own buried secrets, and your comments help me decide which stories to uncover next. Now, let's step back to where this nightmare truly began, in a hotel ballroom in Atlanta, where ambitious men gathered to discuss the future of Southern agriculture. The seeds of horror are often planted in places that appear entirely respectable. The spring of 1852 brought unseasonable rain to central Georgia, turning red clay roads into rivers of mud and delaying the cotton planting by nearly 3 weeks. For most planters, this meant anxiety and financial calculations stretched across long evenings. For Edmund Rutledge, it meant an opportunity to travel to Atlanta for the Southern Agricultural Convention, an annual gathering where plantation owners, agricultural scientists, and businessmen convened to discuss innovations in farming, crop rotation, and labor management. Edmund had built his wealth through calculation rather than inheritance. Unlike many plantation aristocrats who'd received their land and slaves through family lineage, he'd started with a modest cotton operation inherited from a distant uncle and transformed it into one of the most profitable enterprises in Hancock County. By 1852, his plantation, called Clearwater for the spring-fed creek that ran through its eastern boundary, sprawled across nearly 2,000 acres and housed 87 enslaved workers. His cotton fetched premium prices in Savannah. His credit stood unquestioned at every bank between Augusta and Macon, and his name carried weight in the state legislature, where he'd served 2 terms before declining a third to focus on his agricultural pursuits. He was 46 years old that spring, a widower of 3 years. His wife Anne had died of consumption in the winter of 1849, leaving him with 3 daughters and no male heir. This absence haunted him with increasing urgency. Under Georgia law, his estate would be divided among his daughters upon his death, likely fragmenting within a generation as they married and their husbands claimed portions. The Rutledge name would disappear, absorbed into other families, other lineages. Catherine, his eldest at 22, had inherited her mother's quiet dignity and love of literature. She spent hours in the plantation's library, reading novels that Edmund considered frivolous but permitted nonetheless. Margaret, 20 years old, possessed her father's sharp mind for numbers and often helped him review plantation accounts, demonstrating an almost masculine aptitude for business that both impressed and troubled him. Elizabeth, barely 18, showed talent for painting and spent long afternoons capturing the Georgia landscape in watercolors, her easel set up near the creek. All 3 had received educations unusual for Southern women: French, mathematics, history, music. Edmund had hired a tutor from Charleston who lived in a cottage on the property and provided daily instruction. In Edmund's mind, this education served a purpose beyond mere accomplishment. He was grooming them for strategic marriages to men who would expand his commercial network, perhaps even consolidate neighboring plantations through alliance. But the convention in Atlanta introduced a concept that shifted Edmund's thinking entirely. The Grand Hotel's ballroom glittered with chandeliers on the evening of April 23, 1852. Nearly 200 men in black suits filled the space, their conversations creating a low rumble punctuated by the clink of whiskey glasses and the occasional burst of laughter. Edmund stood near the refreshment table, half listening to a conversation about new cotton gins, when a voice from the speaker's podium cut through the noise. "Gentlemen, if I may have your attention. Our next speaker comes to us from the College of Charleston, where he has studied the emerging science of heredity and its applications to agricultural breeding. The speaker was Dr. Nathaniel Pemberton, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles and an enthusiasm that bordered on mania. For 40